The slap hit me so hard the chandelier shivered. Champagne rained off Sloane's ruined gown. Glass cut into my palms. And 100 wealthy strangers stared, like I was a stain they didn't want on their night. She screamed that she didn't know me, called me a hillbilly, while a dozen phones quietly recorded everything. But the moment that froze me wasn't her slap. It was seeing my son, her groom, drop his champagne and start running. They all thought this disaster began with spilled glasses, but they had no idea what was already unraveling beneath it. Before I go any further, tell me where you're watching from, and hit like and subscribe if you've ever been betrayed by family. Because what happened that night wasn't just humiliation, it was the moment years of silence finally cracked open. If any part of this already feels too familiar, stay with me. You'll understand exactly why everything collapsed the way it did. I didn't grow up in a world of glass towers and penthouses. I grew up in a house where the walls coughed before the people did, where coal dust settled on the windowsills like black snow. Appalachia wasn't a hometown. It was a weight you carried in your lungs and in your bones. Back then, before the slap, before New York, before Ethan built a life big enough to outrun the mountain, it was just the three of us in a sagging little house with a furnace that rattled like it had secrets to tell. Jack, my husband, came home every night with soot in the creases of his smile. He'd kiss my forehead and say, "Still breathing, Mary." Like the mountain hadn't taken another inch of him that day. His laugh used to fill the whole kitchen. But as winters passed, that laugh thinned, replaced by coughing fits that shook the walls. At night, while he fought for air, I'd stare at the ceiling and pretend I didn't hear how long it took for breath to return. I didn't know it then, but those gasps were counting down our time together. Ethan was 14 when Jack died, too young to lose a father, too old to pretend he didn't understand what death stole from us. I can still see him at our kitchen table, hunched over schoolwork, beneath the flickering bulb of our one good lamp, pencil tapping, pages turning, that stubborn fire in his eyes, the same one his father carried into the mines every morning. The room always smelled like burnt coffee and wet boots, and outside the wind scraped against the siding, like it was trying to get in. I didn't know it then, but the boy under that lamp was already building an escape route none of us could see. After Jack's funeral, the bills came hard and fast. Red-stamped envelopes, medical debt, funeral costs that felt like punishment for loving someone poor. So I worked. Morning shift at the Main Street diner, vinyl booths cracked open like old skin. Coffee bitter enough to bite back. I poured refills, wiped counters, smiled until my cheeks ached. Linda, my coworker, used to slip me extra quarters when tips were thin. For the boy, she'd whisper. But quarters don't erase debt. They barely slow it. When the diner closed each night, I drove to the next town to clean houses for people who lived in a different universe entirely. One woman, Mrs. Whitmore, never spoke to me except through lists she left on marble counters. Her house glowed with warm lamps and smelled of cinnamon even in July. I'd catch my reflection in her spotless windows, hands raw from bleach, shirt faded from years of scrubbing, and wonder how two lives could exist just a few miles apart yet feel like different planets. I didn't know it then, but that invisible line between people like them and people like me would follow me all the way to New York. Ethan studied while I worked. Scholarships needed fees. Fees needed money. And money always needed more hours from me. The day I went to Principal Ellison's office to ask for extra time on Ethan's program fees, I wore my best dress, the navy one from Jack's funeral. I hoped he'd see effort. He only saw burden. He talked down to me with that tight smile educators use when they think kindness is wasted. He made me sign a payment plan, as if my word wasn't worth the breath it took to speak it. My voice trembled when I whispered thank you. I swallowed the humiliation, but it carved deeper than I thought. What I didn't know what would matter years later was that Ethan heard every word from the hallway. Ethan didn't tell me he'd heard that conversation with Principal Ellison. Not that night. Not for years. But when we got home, he sat at the kitchen table, hands clasped so tightly, his knuckles went white. "Mom," he said quietly, "I'm getting us out of here." His voice didn't shake. That scared me more than if it had. I didn't know it then. But the world should have started paying attention the moment a 14-year-old boy said those words, like a contract. A week later, Trouble pulled up our driveway in a dented pickup. A debt collector. His leather jacket smelled like cigarettes and threats. When I opened the door, he didn't bother with greetings. "Payments are late," he said, stepping forward like he might walk right through me. Before I could answer, Ethan moved between us. Shoulders squared. Jaw set in a way I'd never seen on a child. "We're not giving you anything else," he said. The man sneered. "Kid, move." Ethan didn't. He held that line with nothing but stubbornness and the ghost of his father's courage. The man left cursing. I stood there shaking long after the truck disappeared down the road. I didn't know it then. But that quiet, icy look in Ethan's eyes would return years later under a chandelier. Life blurred into work and exhaustion after that. I scrubbed until my hands cracked. Walked home on aching feet. Patched Ethan's jeans at the kitchen table while he coded late into the night. When he got accepted into a tech program in New York, he hugged me so hard I felt something unstick in my chest. Fear. Pride. Maybe both. "I'll make you proud," he whispered. I already was. I just didn't know how far he'd go. The first time he flew me to New York, I felt like the air was thicker, sharper somehow. His penthouse had floors so shiny, I was afraid to step on them. All glass and steel and endless views. I kept wiping my palms on my skirt, terrified I'd leave smudges. The first morning, I woke at 5 a.m. Out of habit. I tried to make coffee, forgetting someone else was paid to do that now. At one point, Ethan found me scrubbing the guest bathroom tile on my knees. "Mom," he said gently, "you don't have to do that anymore." But I did. Work was the only way I understood how to exist. I didn't know it then. But that instinct, those hands, would become the thing Sloane tried hardest to reshape. I met her during a photo shoot for a feature on Ethan, From Coal to Code. The headline said. She floated into the room like she didn't walk so much as glide. Perfect hair. Sharp cheekbones. A smile too polished to be real. She greeted me with sugary warmth. But her eyes scanned me like a problem she needed to solve. During the shoot, she kept adjusting my shoulders, my hair, even the way I folded my hands. "This angle will be more flattering," she whispered. Her tone was sweet. Her grip wasn't. I didn't know it then. But she wasn't just repositioning me for a photo. She was trying to reposition me out of Ethan's narrative. It didn't stop there. "Mary." Say it like this. Appa Laysha. "Mary. Let's find you clothes that don't look so practical." "Mary. People love a transformation story. We can make you shine." Every comment was dipped in honey. But every sting felt deliberate. I smiled, nodded, swallowed it every time. But each swallow carved deeper than the last. And yet, I kept telling myself what women like me are taught to believe, that rich people were simply different, that their world had rules I didn't understand, that none of this meant anything. But I didn't know not then that every small correction, every sweetly edged remark, was a brick being laid on the path that would eventually lead me to my knees on that marble floor. Glass in my hands, and the whole world watching. People think explosions happen all at once. Loud, violent, obvious. But in my life, the real destruction always started quietly, one small crack at a time, until suddenly the whole structure gave out. Sloane wasn't the kind of woman who threw punches. She carved you down politely, piece by piece, until you didn't recognize your own reflection. The first real fracture came during a small dinner she hosted for Ethan's friends, young executives, polished influencers, people who said network like it was a verb. The apartment smelled like expensive candles and ambition. I wore the navy dress Ethan bought me, smoothing the fabric every few minutes just to keep my hands busy. When I tried to pick up the salad fork, it slipped from my fingers, clattering against the fine china. The room froze, embarrassed for me. Before I could apologize, Sloane laughed softly, the kind of laugh people envy until they hear the edge in it. "Don't worry, Mary," she said, patting my arm. "The Tiffany silver is heavier than what you're used to." Her guests giggled. Ethan smiled because he didn't hear what she really meant. But I did. A heat climbed up my neck, and I gave the same small smile I'd given 1,000 times at the diner whenever someone made a joke that stung too much to laugh at. I swallowed it, but it carved deeper than I thought. After that, her helpful suggestions multiplied. "Mary, maybe try pronouncing Ethan's alma mater correctly. You'll sound more confident. Mary, I found a boutique that can help you update your style. Nothing expensive. Well, for us. Mary, posture, shoulders back. Cameras pick that up." She wrapped every correction in sugar, but the bitterness underneath lingered on my tongue long after she walked away. I told myself to let it slide. For Ethan, for peace, for the wedding. Then came the day I walked past the guest bedroom during a pre-wedding planning session. I wasn't trying to snoop. I was simply delivering fresh towels. Old habits die slow, even in penthouses. But the door was open, and voices drifted out. The photographer said, "Should we include his mom in a few shots? People love origin stories." Sloane's laugh followed, bright and hollow. "We can, but only if we style her. She looks distracting in photos, like the before picture of a makeover." My fingers froze around the towels. Distracting, as if my entire existence was a blemish on the image she was crafting. I stepped back before they saw me. My throat felt tight, like a hand I couldn't see was gripping it. I swallowed that too, but the taste stayed. A week later, Ethan brought her to our hometown. He wanted her to see where he came from, the diner where I worked, the mountain that shaped him. I cleaned the house top to bottom before they arrived, wearing out my knees on the kitchen tile. But when she stepped inside, she wrinkled her nose like she'd walked into a thrift store basement. "It's quaint," she said, forcing a smile. "At the diner?" She barely touched her plate. "Everything tastes like grease and dust," she whispered to Ethan, thinking I couldn't hear. Linda ran out from the kitchen to hug me, apron stained, hair frizzy. Sloane watched her like she was a creature from a museum exhibit. I'd never felt the distance between two worlds so sharply. That night, as I washed the dinner dishes, I heard their voices on the front porch through the cracked window. Ethan asked softly, "What do you think of my hometown?" Sloane sighed, the dramatic kind she used when she wanted sympathy. "It's tragic, Ethan. Sweet in its own way, but not fit for the life you're building. And your mom, she's lovely, but she's stuck here. If you want to be taken seriously, we'll need to clean up the narrative, elevate it." Then she added the sentence that made my blood run cold. "Some parts might need to be erased." Erased? A word meant for pencil marks, not people. The dish slipped in my hand and shattered in the sink. The noise startled even me. But the worst part, I didn't walk outside. I didn't confront her. I didn't defend myself. I just stood there in the dim kitchen of my dead husband's house and swallowed it. I didn't know then that this silence, my silence, would soon become the very weapon she'd use against me. The morning after that trip home, something inside me felt bruised, but I tried to shake it off. I told myself weddings made people stressed. I told myself Sloane didn't mean it. I told myself a lot of things that weren't true. because the truth was too sharp to hold. But Sloane wasn't done. 3 days before the wedding, I walked past the prep room in their building. I wasn't listening intentionally. I was just carrying laundry to the washer, trying to be useful in a place that didn't need me. Then I heard her voice. Ethan can't be taken seriously if we drag his past around like a prop, she said. His mom, she's sweet, but too messy, too raw. We need to manage the narrative, make it cleaner. If that means cutting her out of most media, then fine. A man asked, "Are we recording this?" And then I heard it. A tiny crackle. A click. Sloane sucked in a breath. Is my mic on silence? I froze in the hallway, my heartbeat punching at my ribs. A microphone. Recording. I backed away slowly, terrified they'd open the door and see me standing there. I didn't know it then, but that single careless moment, her own voice captured by her own equipment, would become the spark that set everything on fire later. The next evening, Ethan hosted a small gathering at the penthouse, just family and a few close friends. It should have been calm, soft, a chance to breathe before the storm of the ceremony. But Sloane pulled Ethan aside with the same urgency someone might use to report a gas leak. She needs to practice, she whispered. Her posture, her speech, her everything. Reporters will be there. She might embarrass you. I stood at the hallway's edge, invisible in plain sight. Ethan's voice snapped like a cracked plate. Don't talk about my mom like that. It was the first time I'd ever heard him speak to her without softness. But Sloane adapted fast, sliding sweetness over the sharpness. I'm trying to protect you. Babe, your story is beautiful, but the edges need smoothing. That's all. The edges. I knew she meant me. Later that night, I found Ethan standing alone by the floor-to-ceiling window, the city glowing beneath him like a living map. Mom, he said quietly. Do you like her? I opened my mouth, closed it. If I told the truth, I'd break him. If I lied, I'd break myself. So I said nothing. His shoulders sank. Just an inch, but it was enough. That silence lodged itself deep inside him, a tiny shard that stayed sharp. By the morning of the wedding, the world around me felt too bright, too polished, too cold. The museum's marble floors gleamed like ice. Guests floated in with champagne laughter, their perfumes cloying enough to choke. Everyone shimmered except me. Even the air felt expensive. I kept adjusting the blue dress Ethan had bought me, smoothing the fabric so my hands wouldn't shake. People brushed past me without seeing me, as if I were part of the decor, a chair, a column, a shadow. Then I saw Jason, the young server, wobbling under a tray stacked too high with champagne glasses. His hands trembled, his shoulders strained. He looked exactly like Ethan had the day he stood between me and the debt collector, too young, too small, too alone. My body moved before my thoughts did. I stepped toward him. Careful. Honey, I murmured. Let me help you. He looked relieved, but my heel caught the edge of the ornate rug. A tiny stumble, a whisper of a mistake. The tray tipped. The glasses flew. The champagne arced through the air, shimmering under the chandeliers. And then the world shattered. Crystal exploded across the marble. Champagne drenched Sloane's gown in a single golden wave. The quartet stopped mid-note. Guests froze. The air thickened into something painful. But in that instant, when the glass hit the floor, when her scream tore the silence apart, when everyone turned toward me with horror or curiosity or pity, I knew something with absolute certainty. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't random. This was every insult, every whisper, every correction, every erasure finally breaking open. And I also knew something else. Whatever happened next, none of us were ready for it. The crash of glass reverberated through the museum like a gunshot. For a split second, no one breathed. Not the guests. Not the musicians frozen mid-note. Not even me. Kneeling in a puddle of champagne as shards glittered around my hands like tiny, merciless stars. Then Sloane's scream split the silence. "What did you do?" Her voice ricocheted off the marble walls. Sharp enough to cut. She stared at me as if I were a stain smeared across her perfect world. Her gown clung to her legs, soaked in champagne. A ruined masterpiece she cared about more than any human being in the room. I opened my mouth to apologize, but nothing came out. My breath snagged in my throat. My palms stung from the glass. The cold marble seeped through my dress, chilling every bone in my body. She stepped closer, towering above me. "You clumsy hillbilly," she hissed. "Why are you even near me? Who let her in here?" Her friends gasped. Phones lifted. Someone whispered, "Is she staff?" Another murmured, "Why would Ethan let her come dressed like that?" The humiliation hit harder than the fall, harder than the glass, harder than anything that had sliced into me the past few months. I felt myself shrinking, folding inward, becoming small enough to disappear. And then came the slap. Her palm cracked against my cheek with such force my vision flashed white. The sound rang through the hall, echoing off the high ceilings. The sting spread across my face, hot and immediate, while champagne dripped from my chin. Every conversation died. Every camera zoomed in. Every breath in the room held still. Except one. Mom Ethan's voice cut through the chaos like a blade through fabric. I turned, dazed, and saw him standing across the hall, staring at me, staring at Sloane, staring at the mess of glass at my knees. The champagne flute in his hand slipped, hitting the floor with a soft, pitiful thud. His face changed. Gone was the polite groom, the polished CEO, the man trying to keep two worlds from colliding. What replaced him was colder, sharper, a side of him I'd only seen once on the porch years ago, when he stood between me and a man sent to take what little we had left. He walked toward us, steady, deliberate, the kind of walk that made people move out of his path even before they realized they were moving. Cameras pivoted, guests straightened. The air felt electric. Sloane stepped toward him, panic trembling at the edges of her voice. "Ethan, she ruined everything. Look what she don't," he said. Just that one word. Low, final, deadly calm. He crouched beside me, shrugging off his tux jacket and draping it over my shoulders. His hand touched my arm warm. Is firm, grounding. I didn't realize I was shaking until he steadied me. Then he stood and walked to the microphone. The silence thickened. Guests leaned in, sensing something irreversible was about to happen. Ethan looked out over the room, not at Sloane, not at the ruined gown, not at the shattered glasses, but directly at the people who had watched me be humiliated, who had said nothing, who had recorded instead of stepped in. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, voice cold as steel, "thank you for coming." A ripple of confusion moved through the crowd. "The reception is over." Gasps, whispers, a choked cry somewhere near the stage. His eyes locked on Sloane's, hard, unblinking. "And so," he said, voice dropping just enough for the mic to catch it, "is my marriage." The room erupted not with noise, but with stunned, suffocating silence. And then, for the first time that night, I saw Sloane truly afraid. The world outside the museum didn't wait for us to catch our breath. By the time Ethan guided me out a side door, paparazzi were already gathering, like vultures, sensing fresh meat. Their camera flashes burst against the night, each one capturing a moment I barely understood myself. We slipped into the car. Doors slammed, and suddenly the chaos outside became a muffled roar behind glass. But the internet didn't have glass. By dawn, the slap was everywhere. People slowed the video, zoomed in, analyzed every frame like detectives solving a crime. The moment my knees hit the marble, the champagne drenching Sloane's gown, her hands slicing across my face, Ethan running not to his bride, but to me. And then the line that detonated the world. So is my marriage. Some called Ethan a hero. Some called Sloane a monster. Comment threads erupted. News anchors argued. Influencers made reaction videos. It was all noise loud. Relentless noise. But then, the real shock hit. Someone leaked audio. Not video. Audio. A voice memo pulled straight from the prep room, captured by the tiny mic Sloane forgot she was wearing. Her own words spilled across social feeds like poison. We might need to erase her from the narrative. She doesn't fit the brand. If we want Ethan taken seriously, she can't be part of the story. Erase her. Erase me. Hearing it out loud felt stranger than the slap itself. At least a slap is honest, you see it coming. You feel it land. But erasure, that's a slower, colder violence. By the next morning, brands cut ties with her. Boards quietly removed her name. Invitations vanished. Even her own PR team released statements that sounded suspiciously like apologies. Meanwhile, Ethan shut the penthouse blinds, booked us a car, and drove north to his house upstate. You don't need to watch any of it, he said, but the thing about being erased is that once someone tries to do it, you can't stop looking for the edges they tried to cut. I started volunteering at a small soup kitchen, needing work that didn't require microphones or headlines. My hands felt steadier there. My breathing, too. One rainy evening, while I was stacking bowls, a volunteer leaned in close and lowered his voice. Did you hear? There's more. Another leak. Bigger. Someone's been holding on to something. A chill crawled up my spine. Another leak. Bigger. I didn't ask who was behind it. I didn't need to. Because if that first video cracked the surface, and the audio pulled the wound open, whatever was coming next would finish what that slap started. They thought they humiliated me that night. They thought they buried me in front of the world. But what they never understood was this: buried things don't die. Buried things rise. If you've ever been treated like the outsider in your own family, you know how deep those cuts can go. Maybe you've held your tongue to keep the peace. Maybe you've watched people rewrite your story while pretending it was for your own good. I've lived that silence, and I know how heavy it gets. So, tell me your story in the comments. Tell me who underestimated you, and who regretted it. And if you've ever felt invisible in a room where you should have mattered most, subscribe. This story isn't over.